many people assume that because China is a communist country, it's extremely centralized. But actually, no, it's the most decentralized country in the world, with 80% of its government expenditure, its budget being spent locally by provinces, cities, counties, and so on and so forth. And that's one of the key reasons why China is so fast. It's because it has put in place a system where there is extreme competition between all its local entities.
Thank you very much. That is a wonderful segue actually into the second part that I want to discuss with you. Everybody, I'm still talking to Arnaud Bertrand, the prolific analyst on Twitter. And we just discussed the everything that's happening with the peace negotiations that are happening between the US and Russia and how that impacts Europe. And I would like to go to dig a little bit deeper or pick your brains more deeply about the structural problems that Europe now faces. I mean, to me, on the face of it, it's at least three, right? The structural decline of Europe because some things it's just not able to do anymore. Like it has no industrial defense base. It is being abandoned by the US, at least the way that the Europeans were used to it. I remember quite clearly how when Biden was elected, Biden announced the USA is back. That meant back to like what the Europeans knew before, right? And now it's clear that, oh no, that was Trump was not just an anomaly. It was not just a glitch. No, this is the system that's changing. And if you look up the setup that Trump has got with with the Republicans now, with Vance possibly being the next, taking over the reign after him, I mean, you could expect another 8 years after these 4 years, right? That's on the cards now. And then the third problem is, of course, the relative economic shrinking. I mean, aside from the fact that Europe is being deindustrialized right now, it's also its current economic base is much smaller compared to the entire rest of the world because the rest of the world rose, right? US is now the Europeans are now economically just much less important than what they used to be 40, 50 years ago.
Yeah.
Can you speak to that and let's go into the structure, all the structural problems that Europe has at the moment?
Yes. So first of all, just a small word on the Biden administration. Saying that the U.S. is back and so on. Actually, they were in many ways a continuation of the Trump administration, especially with regards to Europe. I mean, they had the friendly liberal rhetoric, but they did a lot of actions that led to the Europe's deindustrialization. Of course, the most famous one is the Ukraine war, the sabotaging of the Nord Stream pipeline, which had a direct consequence on energy prices. And industry is energy transformed, right? So energy prices are absolutely critical for industry. And he also had very significant legislation like the IRA, Inflation Reduction Act, which did a lot to poach industry from Europe to the US. So yeah, he wasn't a very a figure that really benefited Europe's interests. So structural problem. Again, as I said before, I think the main structural problem is mindset. First of all, you always have to start with that. Shifting from a mindset of we live in a West-dominated world where the Western Alliance is like the lodestar, and you need to organize your strategy based on that. That's over. Now we live in a multipolar world where the US, I mean, it was before, but now it should be really crystal clear to Europeans that it is not, a friend that wants you to thrive, but it is very much a competitor that doesn't look out for your own interest. And so you need to shift your mindset to a mindset of sovereignty, defending and protecting your sovereignty as Europeans, defending and protecting your interests. And when you start from that, you have an understanding of how Im immense the challenge is, because we've lost our sovereignty in an enormous amount of ways. So we're protected, but we have no defense industry. We have no European defense. Security is always the most important condition for sovereignty. You need to be able to protect your sovereignty, first of all. So that's a huge challenge. Speaking of technology is, always absolutely critical, as we've seen in world history. When you fall behind technologically, then you're weak and you can be, taken advantage of by others. It's the whole story of China with its century of humiliation. It fell behind technologically, and so it could be colonized at will by the Western powers. And technologically, Europe has fallen behind in an amazing way. Like it's nowhere to be seen in most technologies that count for the future. So take AI for instance. I was looking at there is a scoreboard of the best AI models out there. The first European model is 34th on the list, after only Chinese and American models. And it's a French company called Mistral. And look at I don't know. Other technologies that matter for the future, like robotic, for instance. I think robotic is going to be absolutely huge. At some point, we're going to have humanoid robots walking, well, helping us in all our tasks, and that's going to arrive, I think, fairly soon. And China and the US are quite advanced in that regard. China has that company called Unitree. In the US, Tesla is working on its humanoid robot. I forgot the name right now. Prometheus or something like that. Whereas Europe's robot, they just don't have one. So there needs to be a lot of effort around that, because otherwise it's going to keep falling behind. And in order to enable that, you need to make a lot of structural changes. You need to be more attractive for scientists to there are a lot of European scientists out there in the US and so on. You need to be attractive for them to come back. You need to pay them more. Salaries for scientists in Europe are extremely depressing, especially when you compare them to the US or China. So yeah, it's almost overwhelming how much work there needs to be done in order for Europe to get back in the race. But there is no choice. It needs to be done, and we better start now, otherwise we're going to be even further behind.
Yeah, I agree. It's just on the other hand, like Europe still has a few things for itself going, right? On the one hand, you have structures that allow for exchange between these 27, 28, well, EU member states and like the larger Europe, including the UK, including like countries like Switzerland and so on. There is exchange and
Yeah,
mechanisms in place, right? So
yeah.
you
No,
could
no,
try to get this
I
running.
I don't know if you read Mario Draghi's recent article in the FT.
What
He
did you
actually
write?
wrote on this specific question that paradoxically there is more trade barriers within Europe, within the 27,
Mm.
on sort of hidden custom taxes, hidden tariffs, than there is between Europe and the outside world. So it's crazy. So it's easier for, say, the US to sell its products in Europe than it is for a French company to sell its products in, say, Germany. So, even in that respect, it's not working. And there needs to be big reforms being made.
Yeah, this
But
is true.
I agree with you that this thi- this should be done. This should
Yeah.
be done.
No, you're absolutely right. I forgot because like if you have a free trade agreement with the EU, that thing counts for all member states. But you as a
Yeah,
member state, you're bound by EU rules and regulations on what to do in order to sell them. And
exactly,
that can be more tedious than having a free trade agreement. Which is why
exactly.
right now the Swiss are not thinking of joining the EU like at all. They're just
Yeah,
thinking about how to create a proper structural trade agreement in order to get to
yeah,
solve their issues with the EU.
yeah,
But
yeah, yeah,
joining now the EU would have so many
yeah,
downsides.
yeah.
Mm.
Or take another issue, energy, which is so important. So first of all, Europe doesn't produce anywhere near enough energy because I actually checked, we produce 25% less electricity than the US, even though we have 400 million people and they have 330 million or so. So we produce way less than they do. And our energy, European energy, is on average 70% more expensive than American energy. And I'm not even speaking about China, which energy is 3 times cheaper than the US, and they produce twice more energy than the entire US. So and the way energy is also set up within Europe is completely stupid because, for instance, if you look at France, we actually have a big advantage when it comes to that because we went nuclear first. 75% of our electricity is produced by nuclear, which is great because nuclear is very cheap. But the way the European rules work is that even though we produce our own electricity in France so cheap, we can't benefit from those cheap prices because we need to pay a European price, basically. So it's like we willingly shoot ourselves in the foot. So yeah, just so many reforms that need to be made that it's almost yeah, it's overwhelming. But again, it needs to be done.
Yeah, it's just also scary to think of what the process would be in order to get all of these things rolling, right? Because the EU administrative apparatus, not just the administrative apparatus, but the political apparatus is so incredibly heavy. I
Yeah,
wonder if the political inertia to get anything going is huge.
yeah,
And then once you get something going, the negotiations they take place on so many levels. They also take place on the national levels, right? And
yeah.
then they go to the higher level. Um,
I
I, I
think
wa-
that actually China is not a bad example around that because not many people know the real structure of China and the reason why China is so efficient and so fast at doing things. Many people assume that because China is a communist country, it's extremely centralized. But actually, no, it's the most decentralized country in the world, with 80% of its government expenditure, its budget being spent locally by provinces, cities, counties, and so on and so forth. Only 20% of China's budget is spent at the central
national level.
level, national level, which when you compare with like the US, for instance, it's 50-50, even though the US is a federation of states.
Hmm.
So, states have, compared with France, for instance, where it's 80-20, but in the other sense, the US is already quite decentralized with states having a lot of power, but China is just, another level with 80% at the province level. Um, and that's one of the key reasons why China is so fast. It's because it has put in place a system where there is extreme competition between all its local entities. And and that's how you progress in the Chinese system as an official. Like it's a meritocratic system. You first start heading a village, and then a county, and then a city, and so on and so forth. And you're always evaluated compared with your peers, right? It's always an exam system on the best rise to the top, and so the central government gives some, sort of vague 5-year objectives, or long-term plans, like China, made in China 2025. But then it's like all the localities need to deliver on this, and those who deliver best are promoted within the system. So there is extreme incentive to do well on that. And that's why it goes so fast and it's so efficient. And also because it's not one way of doing things. Like you have one province that experiments one way of solving a particular issue. Like we need to, I don't know, depollute, for instance, depollute the skies. Let's try to do it this way, and then you see the other provinces see that, wow, that guy did a very smart thing. I'm going to emulate that, or vice versa. Like you can see if something doesn't work, and so I'm thinking something like that for Europe wouldn't be too bad, where the EU Commission uh, wouldn't be this sort of you know this this sort of, in many ways it's much more dictatorial than the Chinese central government, because like you have all those rules that you need to respect, and that's the way it is. Whereas the Chinese approach is more, you have all those objectives that you need to achieve, and you have freedom to decide how, and those who achieve those objectives the best get promoted within the system. Uh,
This,
yeah,
this is so fascinating. Again, how basically China works the opposite way that we think of it does, and how
yeah,
when we analyze the European Union, it actually also works the opposite way from the way we think. But
yeah.
if we distill it down to its most fundamental, would you agree that the difference in the models is that the European Union creates this must do? Cucumbers must be curved like this, otherwise they can't be sold. And the Chinese say like, no, should be. Cucumbers should have this curvature, but we'll leave it up to you to try it out. Is must versus
Uh,
should?
Well, the difference with the Chinese is they don't even speak about the cucumber.
Yeah, well, I'm giving the example because it's such a ridiculous example from the
Yeah, no, no,
European Union. It's just
yeah, but
absolutely dumb.
like to there would be a national objective of we need to sell more I don't know vegetables to
Mhm.
stay in the
Yes.
cucumber themes, and uh, and then it's up to the localities to decide how. And then one locality say, cucumbers sell better if they're squared or whatever. And then another said, no, it works better if they're round. And bit by bit, you arrive at a standard.
So,
Basically, that's more the way it works.
so too much micromanagement in the European Union. That's like stop trying to
Yes,
micromanage the economy, give
yes.
objectives, and leave it at that.
Yeah, but another extremely important feature of the Chinese central government, and I don't know if that's applicable to the US, to Europe, sorry, is at the end of the day, the central government is an HR organization. It is HR that decides who gets promoted, right? That is its most important feature. It is an HR department. And that's what makes the whole system works, because as a politician, that your career depends on your success, based on the objectives of China as a country, right? Uh, and that's very difficult to apply in Europe, which is, of course, a completely different way of doing things, where the European Commission, even though it meddles and interferes in the local politics of states, normally has no say in who rules what country. Like the promotion is based on voting by citizens, on campaigning, and so on. So yeah, that's quite different. So could you think about a dual system where you have the politicians that get elected, but then you have a whole administrative state behind where the promotional system works differently, more based on this sort of meritocratic system? I don't know, but it's important to keep in mind that that is the most important thing.
That's a very interesting observation because like the Europe to a large extent works on this principle that you on a completely different way, right? It shows you the leadership in the leadership where people get promoted who end up there's this I forgot what it is called, this principle of promoting people to their optimal level of incompetence.
Yeah,
You know, as long as you're competent, you rise up, and as soon as you're in a position where you're not competent anymore, you are stuck and you stay there. And then you create a system where you
yeah,
make sure that in every important position you get somebody who's not competent for
yeah,
fulfilling that
yeah.
position. And we
I
can
mean,
see it with Van der Leyen. They're stuck with Van der Leyen.
yeah, I would argue it's even worse than that. I would go back to the allegory of the ship by Plato. Where how do you decide on who steers the ship of state based on its competency, right? Or based on voting by people who are on the ship, and then you elect someone based on his promises of where the ship is going to go, and an amazing picture, and you end up with someone who has not risen at all to the level of its incompetence. Is just been elected there and is completely incompetent for the job. Period. So yeah,
Yeah, and
that's
I would never want to trash talk democracy, but it is very important to recognize the structural challenges that a certain system imposes, right?
yeah,
It's important to recognize what doesn't necessarily work well about it. And the other thing is, of course, the democratic system of the European Union also creates moments in which the regions are able to block decisions of the whole, which in China I believe would be not possible. This example that I always will have at my mind is when the EU tried negotiated the free trade agreement with Canada, and in the end it was I think Wallonia in Belgium that was it Wallonia or was it the other one? Was it the Flemish lands? But I think it was Wallonia that blocked it because in order to create a treaty on the European Union level, you need the okay from all the states, and in order to get the okay from Belgium, you need an okay from all the different regions.
yeah,
And because Wallonia blocked it, you could block the EU level. So that's, I believe, also something that
yeah.
in China wouldn't be possible. But that's just baked into the system how the European Union is working.
Yeah, exactly. Again, because the rules are at that level, right?
Yeah.
On when the rules are at that level, then it becomes you have to get the agreements of everyone.
Mhm.
But if you have the rules much more flexible and decided on a local basis, then it's you don't have that issue. And to come back on democracy, actually France uh, recognized this problem, De Gaulle, at the time, and actually tried to have kind of a mixed system, and that's why we in France created the ENA, École nationale d'administration, where basically the idea was we have democracy, people can vote, but those we vote into power should have at least a similar basis of competency. And so we created that school, École nationale d'administration, which selected the best students in France based on exams, so that they would be the ones to administer the state. And they will rise, through their career up to a place where they could lead a party and compete against other enarch in order to be voted in power. So that was kind of the French system as thought by De Gaulle, which I think is a very good compromise because it is an issue. It is an issue. This issue where you can vote just anyone.
Yeah. The
But
just like because the problem is of course if you have too many incompetent people and they have too much power, then you get very very bad outcomes. The way the
yeah,
Swiss try to solve this is by basically disempowering the parliament by having direct democratic voting. In order
yeah,
to do anything not anything, but for a lot of issues you actually need to gain a national referendum, and that
yeah,
changes the dynamic. So even if we have too many stupid heads in there, the necessity to go back to the general populace and actually have
yeah,
laws, okay, or
yeah,
down, then corrects
yeah,
for that issue. But you need somewhere
yeah,
a correction method to make sure that too many idiots don't screw up the entire system.
yeah. Actually, I've lived a long time in Switzerland. As you know, I lived there 7 years. I think the the Swiss system is actually the closest you can find in Europe to the Chinese system because it is also extremely local,
Yes.
right? So you have the canton, and even at the even more local level, you have a lot of local decision making by the people through referendums, and so it's a very living democracy that always adapts to the conditions on the ground because just anyone can emerge and say, actually, I recognize that there is this big issue where I live in my city or in my canton. I want to do something about it, and you can do something about it, and so that's how the system always course corrects based on reality, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and
And
even on the national level, every Swiss citizen has the power to change the Swiss constitution if
yeah,
she manages to get enough support. But
yeah,
everyone can do it.
yeah,
Mm.
exactly, yeah. And even though the Chinese system is a bit different, the fact that it's also extremely local, with people who are close to the local population making the decisions, who understand the reality on the ground, and those people are really close to the population. I mean, it's not like they're very remote from the people. There is that mindset of staying close to the people. That's very important in the Chinese system. So you have also that flexibility, constant adaptation to the reality on the ground, as opposed to decisions taken from Brussels, which needs to deal with such a diverse amount of realities throughout Europe with countries that are so different from each other that in fact it comes up with rules that are such a compromise that it's irrelevant to everyone at the end of the day.
This has been very, very interesting, this comparison, and I think there's a lot to learn and a lot to benefit from this. Arnaud, people who want to follow you, they should first and foremost go to your Twitter, right?
Yes, yes, yes. It's at Arnaud Bertrand. You just Google Arnaud Bertrand Twitter and you will find me.
And if I think about it, I'll put it into the description because I often forget. I'm sorry, everybody. But Arnaud Bertrand, thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you, Pascal.